Beneath the haze of a warm summer evening, a group of racist men convinced themselves they ruled the streets. They believed their spray cans and baseball bats would send a message loud enough to drive a black man out of town. But what they never expected was resistance. What they failed to see was the unwavering discipline hidden beneath the man's calm exterior, sharpened by years of brutal missions and impossible odds. This wasn't just any man returning to a broken home. He was the military's most lethal Marine, a warrior who had faced enemies far deadlier than a gang of racist thugs. Their taunts turned to threats, and those threats escalated into action. Yet, the man didn't raise his voice. But as the sun dipped beyond the horizon and their laughter filled the air, something shifted. This wasn't going to end the way they imagined. And soon, they would learn the hard way. When fear is provoked, it cuts both ways. Before we go any further, comment where in the world you're watching from. And don't forget to hit that subscribe button. Jamal Hayes adjusted his rearview mirror, his gaze flicking to the neatly folded uniform resting on the seat behind him. After months overseas, the thought of finally stepping into his own home filled him with an unfamiliar sense of relief. The military had taught him to thrive in chaos, but all he longed for now was peace. As he approached the familiar streets of his quiet suburban neighborhood, everything looked unchanged, or so he thought. But as his truck rounded the corner and his house came into view, his relief vanished. His foot slammed on the brakes, his heartbeat hammering in his chest. Slurs and graffiti defaced the once pristine white siding. The porch was scorched, blackened remains of what used to be his welcome mat still smoldering. His lawn was littered with broken beer bottles, fast food wrappers, and trash. Hateful symbols and crude, jagged words stretched across the walls like scars. Jamal threw the door open and stepped out, his breaths heavy as shock gave way to fury. His boots crunched against the gravel as he moved closer, taking in the full extent of the destruction. Then, laughter. His head snapped toward the sound. 6 men lingered by his fence, their bald heads catching the afternoon light. Swastikas and other hateful symbols were inked across their arms and necks. They leaned against the fence, smirking, drinking from cans, admiring their own work. One of them lifted his beer in a mock salute. "Hey there, Marine. Like your welcome home gift." Another kicked a crumpled soda can onto the lawn, chuckling. "Figured you'd appreciate the personal touch." Jamal's voice erupted, sharp, raw. "Get off my property. Now." For a moment, the group hesitated, caught off guard by the intensity. But then the leader, a burly man with a scar slicing down his cheek, stepped forward, his smirk widening. "Or what?" he sneered, spreading his arms. "You gonna call the cops? Good luck with that. They don't do favors for people like you." Laughter rang out once more, their confidence unshaken. Training at war, with rising fury. This wasn't fear. This wasn't hesitation. It was restraint. For the moment, the gang didn't move. If anything, they seemed emboldened by Jamal's anger, feeding off it like predators catching the scent of blood. The leader, Scarface, swaggered forward, his beer can dangling carelessly from his hand. "Relax, Marine," he mocked, his tone dripping with condescension. "We're just having a little fun. No need to get all angry about it." He drew out the words, smirking, while the others snickered behind him. Jamal stood firm, his chest rising and falling as he fought to control the fire seething within him. "This is my home," he said, his voice low but unwavering. "You have no right to be here. Leave. Now." "Leave now," one of the men parroted, his voice high-pitched, earning laughter from the group. "You hear that?" Another chimed in, grinning. "He thinks he owns this place." The leader stopped a few feet away, tossing his empty beer can onto the lawn. "Let me tell you how things work around here," he sneered, pointing a finger at Jamal. "We decide who stays and who goes. And guess what? You don't belong here." Jamal's jaw clenched, feeling his muscles tighten, instincts screaming at him to act. But he held back. "You're trespassing," he growled, his teeth gritted. "I'm telling you one last time. Get off my property." The leader tilted his head, feigning confusion. "Your property?" He looked back at his crew, his face twisted in mock shock. "Did you guys know this was his property? Sure doesn't look like it." One of the men laughed, gesturing to the graffiti. "Looks more like ours now." Scarface grinned, his voice dripping with malice. "See, Marine, we're doing you a favor, helping you realize this isn't your home anymore. This town, it doesn't want you." Jamal stepped forward, his eyes narrowing. "You're done. Leave." The laughter stopped. The men exchanged looks, the tension in the air thickening. "You've got a lot of nerve," Scarface said, his grin fading, his voice low. "Thinking you can talk to us like that. You think that uniform makes you untouchable?" He took a step closer, closing the distance between them, invading Jamal's space. "Let me tell you something, Marine. You might scare people out there, but here, you're just another." Jamal's hand shot up, halting Scarface mid-sentence as he pointed toward the fence. "You've got 10 seconds to walk off my property." For the first time, Scarface hesitated. His eyes flicked to Jamal's hand, and his smirk faltered, replaced by something far darker. "You think you're tough, huh?" he spat. One of the men muttered, "Maybe we should shut up." Scarface snapped without even turning, his eyes locking with Jamal's again, his lips curling into a sneer. "We'll go for now," he hissed, leaning in close, his voice dripping with venom. "But you'd better believe, we're not done here." He stepped back, his words like a threat hanging in the air. "This town doesn't want you, Marine, and we'll make sure you get the message." The gang turned, walking away, but not before one of them picked up a bottle and threw it at Jamal's porch. It shattered against the wood, glass scattering across the steps. They laughed as they disappeared down the street, their voices echoing in the stillness. Jamal remained rooted in place, his fists clenched so tight his knuckles turned white. His heart pounded in his ears, the words they'd spat replaying in his mind. He forced himself to breathe, but the rage, simmering beneath the surface, refused to settle. He turned toward his house, the sight of the graffiti and destruction twisting the knife deeper into his chest. This wasn't just an attack on his property. It was an attack on everything he'd fought for, everything he stood for. Jamal climbed the steps, carefully stepping over the shards of broken glass. His hand hovered over the door handle, but he didn't go inside. Not yet. The fight wasn't over. Not by a long shot. He stood on his porch, staring at the wreckage, the hateful graffiti, the shattered glass, the scorched remnants of his welcome mat. It all felt like a slap in the face. His chest heaved, struggling to contain the fury building inside him. He had risked his life for this country, fought in foreign lands so others could enjoy the freedoms they so easily took for granted. And now, back on his own soil, this was his welcome. Not just vandalism. Rejection. Pure. Venomous. A burst of laughter echoed from down the street, sharp, taunting. Jamal turned his head, spotting them. The gang of bald men huddled around an old truck at the corner, passing beers between them, laughing like they'd just won some victory. The rage ignited into a roaring inferno. Without hesitation, his boots pounded the gravel as he stormed toward them, his strides long and purposeful. "Hey!" Jamal's voice rang out like a command, sharp and undeniable. The gang turned, their laughter fading into smug smirks as they saw him approaching. For a brief moment, their eyes met.